Chapter 51 Ferdinand's Fear. You are listening at Mtlnovel Aud. On the day when Professor Murray held a party, Wade changed into the dress and dragon-hide boots that Fiona carefully selected for him after breakfast. He stood in front of the mirror and Fiona circled him, adjusting some details from time to time. "So handsome, baby." Fiona kept uttering all kinds of exaggerated praises. "You are definitely the most dazzling little gentleman at the party. Seriously, why don't you just let me pick out the necklace for you to wear? The bow and arrow-shaped pendant is super cool and will definitely make other kids jealous." "No. Mom, I'm not a 3-year-old child." Wade firmly refused without hesitation. Fiona sighed. "I didn't want to wear it even when I was 3 years old. So when I was 11 I didn't even know how to wear one." Ferdinand raised his wrist to check the time from time to time, and looked out the door from time to time. "The professor said he would pick you up at 10 o'clock, right?" he confirmed with his son. "Yes, that's what the letter said." But it was 1 minute before 10 o'clock, and there was still no one outside the door. "Are you late?" Fiona guessed. "Maybe there is something delayed." Ferdinand looked at the door again. "I just hope they don't suddenly appear at the door." "That's not possible. There are ordinary people around here. How many people will see that?" Fiona said firmly, "It must have been delayed by something. Maybe we will receive an owl soon." The letter came. Fiona said, running over and opening a window so that the owl could fly in. Just when she turned around, the flame in the fireplace suddenly turned green, making the whole room green, and then a dark shadow came out of the fireplace. Ferdinand jumped up, quickly reached behind his clothes with his right hand and pulled out his pistol, and pushed Vader back with the other hand, shouting, "Who is it?" "No, Dad, it's Professor Murray." Wade hurriedly grabbed his arm, and suddenly found that his father's palm was very cold. He looked over in surprise and found that Ferdinand was clenching his teeth, the veins on his neck were popping out, and his tense expression looked very cold and unfamiliar. Wade was stunned for a moment. From the moment he received the acceptance letter to Hogwarts, the Greys had always seemed very happy. They are full of curiosity about the world of magic and eagerly participate in the world here. They know almost more about the wizarding world than Vader. Vader had always thought that was the case, but at this moment, he suddenly discovered that his father might have always hidden a deep fear of the wizarding world. Fiona was only startled at first, but calmed down after hearing Wade's words. She took a few steps forward and asked curiously, "Is this Floo travel?" Ferdinand walked over quickly, as if he and his wife were going to greet the guests. But Wade saw that he was actually standing in front of Fiona. Stepping out of the flames was indeed Professor Murray. He patted the soot on his body and said with a smile, "Yes, it is a safe and convenient way to travel. Except for the soot, everything is fine. Hello, Mr. Gray, Mrs. Gray, I am Terence Murray, I think you should know." Of course. Ferdinand had already put away his pistol, and there was nothing strange on his face. "Welcome, Professor Murray. I'm sorry, my fireplace has not been thoroughly cleaned in more than 2 years." Fiona poked her head out from behind him and asked, "Can we travel on fire too?" "Oh, probably not," Professor Murray said with a smile. "Actually, the Ministry of Magic prohibits connecting the fireplaces of non-magical people's homes to the Floo network. In order to pick up Vader, I asked someone to temporarily open the Floo network for me. The authority of the network will be restored after we leave. Vader, I'm glad to see you are ready." "Yes, Professor." Vader glanced at his parents, put his wand into the wand pocket on his dress robe, walked over and said, "Shall we leave now?" "Of course, the guests are waiting for us." Professor Murray magically pulled out a small bag containing sparkling powder and asked, "Have you ever used Floo powder?" "No, Professor." "It's easy, just watch what I do." He handed the bag to Wade, picked up a handful of powder and threw it into the fire. Suddenly the flames turned green. "Remember, you must state the address clearly, Soa Luo Garden. Close your eyes and don't wander around in the fireplace, otherwise you will get bruised, and you may even come out from other fireplaces." Professor Murray walked straight into the fire and demonstrated, "The Cypress Garden." He disappeared from the fire with a whoosh. Wade also pinched a handful of flu powder and walked towards the fireplace. When he was about to throw it away, he turned back, looked at his father deeply and said, "Dad, I'll be back in the evening." "Yeah." Ferdinand's throat rolled, he wanted to say something but held back, and looked down at him. "Follow your professor, don't conflict with others." "I understand." Wade nodded seriously. Fiona put her hands on her hips and pretended to be angry. "I only want to say goodbye to my father, but not my mother." "How could it be?" Wade smiled, stepped forward and hugged his mother. "Goodbye, Mom." He sprinkled the flu powder, and the flames immediately turned a green color. Vader suppressed his instinctive fear of flames and walked in as if he was used to it. The flames surrounded him like warm breath. Through the firelight, Wade saw the remaining panic in his father's eyes. It is the uneasiness and fear caused by a stranger suddenly breaking into a harbor that one always thought was safe. "Alpinia Garden," Wade said clearly as he looked at his father. In an instant, both parents and the living room disappeared from sight. He rotated rapidly in the green flames, and countless fireplaces flashed by quickly. Vader immediately closed his eyes. When he was spinning so dizzy, the extremely fast rotation suddenly stopped again, and when Vader was about to fall, a pair of strong arms supported him. "It's not a good feeling, is it?" A voice said, "I heard that this is your first time using the flu network." The man pulled him out of the fireplace. Wade coughed twice, rubbed away the cigarette ashes that accidentally got into his eyes, and saw a big man standing in front of him. He was very tall, about 2 meters tall, with a burly build and a somewhat fierce appearance, but his eyes looked gentle when he bent down to look at him. "Ahem, sorry, who are you?" Wade asked. A water glass was passed in front of him. "Drink some water." The big man took out his wand and used, "Clean up," and the dust on Vader's body immediately disappeared. He said, "I am Stephen Murray, the son of Terence Murray. My father was originally waiting for you here, but a friend from France has just arrived, and he wants to greet him. You can just walk around first, eat something." Chapter 52 Professor Murray's Party. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Stephen was probably given the task by his father to entertain the guest at the party, that is, Wade. He had been accompanying the little wizard and did not seem impatient. However, the huge height difference between the two sides obviously made the guests who saw them feel very funny. From time to time, someone looked at them and laughed. Stephen pretended not to see anything and accompanied Wade to visit the Alsofla garden. The garden was neat and tidy, and the long pale yellow table was filled with a variety of food and drinks for the guests to take. The party was held around a fountain. In the center of the fountain was a mermaid statue, a very beautiful mermaid in the legend, with a graceful figure and a glittering fish tail, and a moving chanting from her mouth. There were also small dancer statues on the stone railings around them. They danced tirelessly, and small golden light balls were spinning and splashing around. Wade reached out and gently touched a light ball. It was punctured like a bubble, and his fingers felt a little cool. The green grass around was freshly trimmed, like a layer of green and fluffy carpet. Various kinds of flowers are planted around the fountain and in the flower beds. The clusters of blooming flowers are crowded together, which looks particularly gorgeous. Some flowers can only be seen in spring and summer, but they bloom here regardless of the season. On both sides of the road, some tall trees with crowns like giant umbrellas are planted. This is the origin of the name of Althea Garden, Althea. Stephen proudly introduced this plant to him. Their history can be traced back to at least 200 million years ago, earlier than dinosaurs. They are real living fossils. The Mori family has a house elf who is responsible for taking care of these Althea trees. Halfway through the tour, a paper crane flew over and suddenly opened its mouth to speak. The voice of Professor Mori. "Stephen, bring Wade to the small stone platform." "Okay." Stephen responded, and the paper crane landed on his shoulder and suddenly tilted his head, as if looking at Wade next to him. Stephen saw Wade staring at the paper crane and smiled and said, "This is my father's work. He once went to Japan to exchange ideas with the magic school and found that the students there liked to fold these small paper cranes. After returning, he began to use paper cranes to send messages. Later, the Ministry of Magic introduced it, but they thought paper cranes were too troublesome, so they changed to paper airplanes. They are neither flexible, nor can they speak, nor are they beautiful. The only advantage is that they are very cheap. Ministry of Magic. Wade thought for a moment and asked, so what did they use to send messages before paper airplanes? Two-way mirrors are too expensive, it can't be the FLU network, right? Use owls. Stephen said with a smile, you can imagine, dozens of owls flying around the office, or filling the elevator, with feces and feathers everywhere. I saw it once when I was a child, it was a disaster. Wade finally understood why he unconsciously looked down on the Ministry of Magic in his tone. Anyone who has seen those officials being troubled by owl feces would probably not respect them. The small stone platform is a small garden with a foundation 2 or 3 feet higher. There are white marble steps, lavender peach leaf bell-shaped flowers fluttering in the wind, delphiniums and geraniums scattered around, and mosses crawling on the brick walls. The air is particularly fresh and pleasant. In addition to Professor Murray, there are only 5 or 6 people in the garden, all of whom are dressed gorgeously and look prominent. They heard the sound and turned their heads to look over. Everyone's actions were very consistent. They first saw the tall Stephen, and then their eyes fell down together and found Wade, who looked like a dwarf compared to the former. Oh, Wade, my child. Professor Murray came over happily, completely ignoring his real child. He directly put his hand on Wade's shoulder and took him to the crowd. This is my new student this year, a real student, Wade Gray. Everyone nodded and smiled at Wade. A man with brown curly hair complimented, it seems that this child must be gifted to be appreciated by you at such a young age. Professor Murray nodded and said, he is only in the 1st grade, but his alchemy level has surpassed yours when you graduate, Marchionne. Others laughed. Obviously everyone knew that although this man named Marchionne took alchemy as an elective, his level was really not very good. It was probably a headache for Professor Murray when he was in school. Marchionne smiled and was not embarrassed. He looked at Wade seriously. Professor Murray seemed to think that the previous sentence was not convincing, so he immediately gave another example. This child relied on self-study to memorize the entire contents of Magic Pronunciation Table, Magic Symbol Collection, Runic Dictionary, and Ancient Magic Simple Introduction. It only took 2 months. Wow! Now everyone finally understood the weight of gifted talent. They had basically taken ancient magic classes and even alchemy classes, and they knew how difficult it was to remember those crooked symbols and weird syllables. If nothing else, at least this child has surpassed 99% of people in memory and diligence. Not only that, Professor Murray dragged out his tone, with pride, deliberately putting the most important part at the end, and several people cooperated to make a very interested listening posture. Wade observed silently. Although he didn't know the identities of these people, it was obvious that he had seen Professor Murray's status very clearly. He has only been studying with me for more than a month, and he has already made his first work. I swear, he did it completely on his own, and I didn't point out a single letter. Professor Murray showed off loudly, as if revealing the winning lottery numbers, and slowly took out a brand new book of friends, let it hang in the middle of everyone, and asked with a smile, can anyone guess it? Purpose. Book of Friends. Several people looked at each other, gathered around the Friends' tent in an orderly manner, and took out their wands to check. The Friends' tent was shrouded in various lights over and over again. However, Professor Murray added a protective spell to this Book of Friends, and ordinary detection spells cannot detect the magical structure in it. 2 people soon gave up. They were not interested in a child at all, and they didn't think he would make any powerful alchemy products. They were just touting him to please Professor Murray. The rest of the people examined it for a while. The man named Marchionne's eyes suddenly lit up. He picked off a leaf and turned it into a quill, and wrote a line of words on the paper. Money is a bottomless sea, I want to swim in it. Then he turned back quickly, and the more he turned, the more fanatical he looked. The people around him didn't take it seriously at first, and then gradually their eyes widened and they kept swallowing. Professor Murray showed a smile that said, everything is under control. Chapter 53 Stephen's Ideal. You are listening at novelfull.audio. No, sir, this number is not good. It's a bit too much. Professor, please consider me, business is not good now, can we share some profits? It's just the idea that is clever, but it's easy to copy. You should know how rampant piracy is. If the cost is too high, people would rather buy fakes. I can't make much money. Two-way mirrors and flu powder can replace its function. It may not be as popular as you think. We are just testing the waters at the beginning. No one knows how it will sell. If you ask too high, I can only give up. The crowd surrounded Professor Murray, talking one after another, as if they were besieging him. When Marchionne started to quote, Wade was finally sure that Professor Murray's party was actually a new product launch for his Book of Friends. No wonder he didn't let Wade sell the Book of Friends himself at school. If the information of similar products was leaked in advance, it might not have achieved the results today. And Wade can only earn a little pocket money from students by doing small things at school. How can he compare with the efficiency of these multinational companies? Each of these strange wizards in the small garden can be called the head of a multinational company. Because of the existence of the Flu network and the port key, it is much easier for wizards to cross different countries than muggles. And with the traceless extension spell, the cost of logistics and transportation can be ignored, so wizards can easily sell goods to different countries and even different continents. Wade followed Professor Murray and watched him argue with these wizards about how much the patent license for the Friends book should pay. Someone proposed to buy it out directly with 100,000 galleons, and was almost kicked out by Professor Murray. He raised it all the way to 200,000 galleons, but Professor Murray insisted on not agreeing and was only willing to sell the right to use it. At this time, these wizards no longer flattered and respected Professor Murray before, but negotiated with great care. Some pestered, some were picky, some pretended to give up, and some began to play the emotional card. But Professor Murray was like a stone pillar in the river hit by water from all directions, and was not shaken at all. He started by asking for an incredibly high price, and then bargained with these people little by little, constantly showing the advantages of the Book of Friends: fast, convenient, low price. Wizards all over the world will buy it, and will buy it repeatedly throughout their lives. Do you know how beautiful and stable its structure is? Counterfeit items will not have the stability of the Book of Friends at all. If you don't believe it, try it yourself. Your transformation spell may be ineffective if it exceeds 50 meters, and it is impossible to transmit complex information. Some people saw that they couldn't convince Professor Murray, so they simply bypassed him and came to Wade. But Wade just smiled and didn't say anything, as if he was shy, hiding behind Professor Murray. He knew that at the age of 11, there was no need to be so smooth, mature, and sharp. Just leave everything to adults. And he also knew his own limitations, because if it was just Wade himself, he might have directly agreed to the 100,000 galleons buyout price. After all, before this, Wade's best idea for Friends' book was to earn a few hundred or 1,000 galleons from his classmates at Hogwarts, and that would require him to make a large number of Friends' books in the dormitory day and night, like an assembly line worker. But now, he was about to sit on the capitalist's table. Of course, the decision-making power was handed over because the adult in front of him was trustworthy and would really consider him. Wade looked up and looked at Professor Murray, who was firing on all cylinders for him. The old man's thin back was like a tall cliff, and Wade's eyes were a little confused and complicated. Seeing Wade being entangled, his eyes were blank and a little pitiful. Professor Murray waved his hand and asked Stephen to take Wade out to play and not get in the way here, and then he rolled up his sleeves, looking like he was busy fighting. Stephen, who was as quiet as a plant and was once again classified as a child, he hesitated to speak, but finally closed his mouth and obediently took Wade away. After leaving, he couldn't help but sigh deeply. If you have something to do, you can go first. I can just find a place to read. Wade looked at him and said sympathetically, who would like to play with children? He himself doesn't like it. No, it's not because of you. Stephen was dejected and didn't want to say it, but under Wade's gaze, he slowly expressed his troubles. I'm already 36 years old, and my father still always treats me as a child. In fact, I want to follow Mr. Scamander's footsteps, travel around the world, and be a magical zoologist. But my parents don't want to let me go far away, saying it's too dangerous. Wade looked at him puzzledly. But they didn't put you under house arrest. A man in his 30s, and a wizard, can't he leave if he wants to? If I leave without saying goodbye, my mother will be so sad, my father will definitely be angry, Stephen said worriedly. I still hope to get their understanding and support, otherwise I won't dare to come back after I leave. Wade was speechless. He didn't expect that Professor Murray's son looked like a bear, but had a soft personality like a rabbit. He thought for a while and asked, "Why don't you write a letter to Mr. Scamander?" "Write a letter?" "Right, what letter?" "I heard that Mr. Scamander has many magical animals himself. Maybe you can ask him to provide you with a job as a breeder. The salary is not important. What is important is that you can learn about magical animals from Mr. Scamander. If one day, you can deal with various magical animals as calmly as that gentleman, Professor Murray should be able to let you travel with confidence, right?" Wade thought of the magical box in Scamander's hand that had multiple environments and climate changes, and felt envious from the bottom of his heart. Yes, why didn't I think of this method? Stephen was overjoyed. He was happy for a while, but hesitant. Then how should I write this letter? Will it be offensive? He asked seriously with anxiety, even though the person in front of him was just a child. Just tell the truth. Wade suggested, write down your worries and ideals, as well as your understanding of magical animals. This way, even if Mr. Scamander disagrees, he won't be angry about it. I just don't know if Mr. Scamander will think that the letter was written by a fresh graduate just by looking at the tone and wording of the letter. When they first met, Wade thought he was a very strong man, then he found him gentle and calm, but after getting along for a while, he felt that his true character was like a child, even simpler than many children. No wonder Professor Murray didn't dare to let him go out. If it was his own son, Wade wouldn't dare to let him go around the world alone. Chapter 54 Contract. You are listening at Audio. Although Stephen couldn't wait to write the letter, and Wade said it was okay to be alone, Stephen still did not put aside his duties and ran away. He and Wade discussed the wording of the letter for a while, and then started talking about the magical creatures he had raised. Although Professor Murray did not agree to allow him to travel to places where dangerous magical creatures lived, he did not completely reject Stephen's dream. Stephen has owned a farm since graduating from Hogwarts, and he has raised many cuties there over the years. Vader knew that Hagrid at Hogwarts liked to raise all kinds of dangerous creatures, such as fire dragons and so on, and called them cute little animals. He thought that Stephen was also like this, but after learning more about it, he realized that they were really cute and basically harmless magical creatures, such as ball escapers, soundless birds, velvets, fairies, swallow-tailed dogs, etc., the most dangerous of which is a bird snake. This creature can expand and contract its size at will, becoming as huge as a dragon, but it feeds on insects, birds and rats. I have always wanted to raise a grayling. Stephen said, did you know? It is a type of Pegasus. Grayling can fly and run faster than the wind. But except for the mythical Sigurd, no one has ever tamed the grayling. Is this Pegasus difficult to tame? They are very free animals, yearning for freedom and unwilling to be restrained. Stephen said, and then talked about other Pegasus, the Thestral from Hogwarts, the Rune Horse from Beauxbatons, and the fire-breathing Pegasus Iseron. Some wizards look down upon any magical creatures other than wizards, viewing them as inferior animals. But Stephen was fascinated by it, and there were so many kinds of creatures. Wade felt that he had learned a lot just by chatting with him. Suddenly the arrival of a person interrupted their conversation. It was a blonde wizard who was at the small stone platform before. With a look of decadence and frustration on his face, he came over to say hello to Stephen, then looked at Wade, steeled himself and smiled. Mr. Grieg, it's a pity that we don't have the opportunity to cooperate this time. I hope that next time you have any new works, please contact me and I will definitely give you a price that satisfies you. He handed over a business card with the wizard's name and contact address written on it. Stephen raised his eyebrows and lost his smile. His originally honest and gentle expression suddenly looked a little cold. Wade took the business card and said with a smile, I hope I can have this opportunity in the future. The blonde wizard relaxed a little and hurriedly said goodbye. You're not really going to cooperate with him, are you? He called you by the wrong last name. Stephen said unhappily. Yeah, he called him by the wrong name. Wade put away the business card and said, "But it doesn't matter, because I don't intend to remember him." As if the blonde wizard had turned on some switch, two more wizards came to say goodbye one after another. They said the same thing before leaving and left their business cards to Vader, but this time, they finally remembered Vader's full name. After they left, Stephen introduced in a low voice to Wade. "Don't cooperate with Bolton. He seems to be easy to talk to, but in fact he is shady and often manipulates contracts. He just doesn't dare to trick my father." In other words, it would be easy for Vader to suffer a loss if he dealt with him. A wizard with a middle-parted head and a beard came to say goodbye, holding a conspicuous black cane in his hand. "Mr. Gray, I really appreciate your talent. Unfortunately, Professor Murray and I have big differences on price. I hope we can keep in touch and new opportunities may arise in the future. Of course, thank you for the time and energy you invested in this," Wade said, taking his business card. "Cyrus Sharp, this is the name of the wizard. Sharp is a very capable person, and he can always get all kinds of hard-to-get things, including a lot of contraband. I heard that he went to Azkaban 3 times when he was young. My father actually doesn't like him very much, but sometimes I buy things from him," Stephen said later. "Can you come out after entering Azkaban?" Vader was surprised. In his impression, Azkaban was an isolated island in the vast ocean, a prison with no entrance and no exit. Stephen misunderstood what Wade meant and explained, "Well, because he is very cunning and good at covering up his crimes, each sentence is no more than half a year." "Oh, well, that's it." After hearing this, Vader knew that he had made a fool. The movie only played Death Eaters who were sentenced to life imprisonment, which did not mean that Azkaban only had life imprisonment as a punishment. The wizards left one after another, and finally only Marchionne was left walking out of the small stone platform, complaining loudly as he walked, "Dear Professor Murray, I used to be your student, but now I feel that I am a little bit different. I have never received your preference. Of course, I am not complaining. I just want to tell you that even if I leave school now, I will always respect your decision and hope that you can give me a little attention and care." He made a very small gap with his thumb and forefinger to show how humble his request was. "Come on, when have you ever suffered a loss?" Professor Murray said angrily. Indeed, although Marchionne was complaining, the corners of his mouth could not be controlled and raised with a proud expression on his face. He walked up to Wade with easy and quick steps, took off his hat and bowed, and said with a smile, "This is the first time we meet, Mr. Wade Gray. Please allow me to introduce myself. I am Marco Marchionne. I am engaged in the trading of various types of magic items. I believe that meeting you today must be a blessing, and I look forward to establishing a deep friendship with you and bringing more good changes to the wizarding world in the future, or earn more money. Hello." Wade was startled by his exaggerated movements and subconsciously looked at Professor Murray. Professor Murray nodded and directly stated the final result. Marchionne is willing to pay 50,000 galleons to obtain the technical authorization for the Book of Friends. At the same time, for every galleon he earns using the Book of Friends in the future, he will pay you 3 AC. Marchionne's bright smile suddenly became a little stiff. Obviously, although this price could still make him a lot of money, he felt heartbroken and frustrated when he thought that he might not have to pay so much, so he kept mumbling again, scolding Professor Murray for being too partial to Wade, and completely taking advantage of him as a poor businessman. Professor Murray remained unmoved, as if Marchionne's voice was just a fly buzzing next to him. He quickly made a contract and served as a witness to urge Marchionne and Wade to make the contract. The advantage of the magical world is that there is no need to worry about business partners breaking their contracts, because the price paid for breaking a contract is often more terrible than death. Chapter 55, Marchionne's Magic Workshop. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Marchionne was a man who was passionate about the pursuit of wealth, and he was always very explicit about it. After signing the contract, Marchionne urged to take the next step immediately. He was not willing to waste a second of making money. This time, Professor Murray asked Stephen to entertain the guests at the party while he accompanied Wade to Marchionne's magic workshop. It's best to put the first batch of goods on the shelves before the start of school. Students and their parents will definitely be willing to empty their wallets to buy our goods. Marchionne said enthusiastically. we can also launch different packaging in different quantities. Different qualities. Even if it is just to add some printing on parchment and sprinkle some gold powder, the pure-blood nobles are willing to pay 3 times the price. By the way, I have to rush to make a batch of posters and put them up tomorrow morning. Go to Diagon Alley. Wade couldn't help but be speechless and asked, is it too late? Of course. Marchionne blinked, dear Vader, the world of magic is omnipotent. Vader thought he had some magical spell that could speed up production, but when he used flow powder to get to Marchionne's company, he discovered that it was the power of money. The company hall is very spacious, with a small flowing waterfall in the center, and the large characters Aslan's magic workshop shine in gold above the water waves. The arched dome is painted with pictures of various magical creatures, some of which are still moving slowly. There were burning fireplaces all around, with green flames rising and falling, and wizards coming out of them from time to time. Why are you suddenly notified that you have to work overtime during the Christmas holiday? A young man probably didn't notice that his boss was also nearby and complained loudly, I was planning to travel to Italy. I heard that there are products that need to be produced urgently. Another witch said with joy, overtime pay will be 3 times the usual rate. The short-haired young man immediately calmed down, that's it, that's not bad. Give way, please give way. A goblin shouted loudly, directing the box as high as a hill to move with difficulty. He moved slowly because there were many people in the hall, which made the goblin look very irritable. The sudden increase in work tasks made everything look messy, and there were also several house elves running between people's legs, running around quickly and delivering various things. Colorful paper airplanes were hovering in groups over the hall. From time to time, when they spotted a person, they would plunge down from above with a whooshing sound. Oh, damn! A wizard suddenly wore a paper airplane on his hat. He took off the airplane and unfolded it to take a look, and immediately shouted, why did I just find out now that there is not much oil in the stone-scale fish? I said it long before the holiday. Check the inventory and replenish it promptly. Don't let me know who is neglecting their duties. He hurried through the crowd, almost knocking over the goblin, who was so angry that he dropped the box and cursed loudly. Wade was very surprised, judging from the current messy state of the magic workshop. Marchionne may have just ordered all employees to prepare to work overtime after seeing the effect of the Book of Friends. At that time, everyone still held out hope of negotiating with Professor Murray. But the situation was Marchionne, who must win, may have already thought about how to carry out the follow-up work. Sorry, it's really messy here today. It's not usually like this. Vader, Professor, follow me, this way. Marchionne led Wade and Professor Murray through the crowd and entered the special elevator. He breathed a sigh of relief, pressed the button for 6th floor, technical department, and loosened his collar at the same time. Your workshop now has 7 floors. Professor Murray squinted at the row of elevator buttons and said, I remember it was only 5 floors when I came here last time. Yes, we have developed well in the past few years. Marchionne said proudly, the transformation of the magic radio is a big step, and this is also thanks to the professor's willingness to give us authorization. There are not many wizards who are willing to take the initiative to accept new things, let alone modify Muggle objects. Many people still think that Muggles are stupid, low-level creatures. They are really stupid. When I first went to school, I saw the Scarlet Train running like a giant beast in the Scottish Highlands. I was deeply shocked by the wisdom and power of Muggles. After graduating from school, I originally went to a Muggle university to study, but due to various reasons, I regretfully gave up. For various reasons, isn't it just because I don't understand? Professor Murray revealed the facts bitterly. Ha ha ha, don't speak so bluntly in front of children, Professor. Wade suddenly discovered that although Professor Murray often complained about Marchionne, the relationship between them was much better than it seemed on the surface. When talking in private, there was a special tacit understanding. He looked at the posters on the elevator and listened silently without interrupting. There are 2 goblins and 5 or 6 wizards in the technical department. They have prepared various tools and are waiting in the office. This place is different from a Muggle office. There are all kinds of wonderful, slowly moving magical objects, lights of different colors flash from time to time, and the room is filled with many tiny sounds. When they arrived here, Professor Murray and Marchionne found an empty table and sat down to drink tea while Wade communicated with the people in the technology department. Ved first demonstrated the production process of the Book of Friends. He brought ready-made potions that took a long time to prepare. All the people present were experts. They almost mastered the general process after watching it once. Then they disassembled the whole process step by step, and finally reached a point where more than 80% of the small steps could be completed even by third-year students at Hogwarts. Some people were constantly calculating how to further reduce the cost and find various materials for preparation. In less than half an hour, the technical department had determined the production process of the first batch of products, and the entire magic workshop really entered the stage of high-speed operation. During this time, although Marchionne only occasionally chatted with Professor Murray in a low voice, he was also observing Ved without leaving any trace. The black-haired boy was not very tall. He rarely spoke after showing his work, but every time he spoke, he would speak meaningfully and to the point. The members of the technical department tried to change his magic rune circuit several times, but before they did it, he pointed out the consequences of doing so, either reducing stability or causing delays or even loss of transmitted information. As it turned out, he was right every time. Marchionne secretly stuck out his tongue, finally understanding why Professor Murray had always looked down on his level. He had clearly scored an E, good, in the Ultimate Wizard Registration Exam. Look at this kid. He not only has genius creativity, a diligent attitude toward study, but also a very pragmatic and hard-working experimental spirit. If he had not tried dozens or hundreds of times, how could he know all the changes? No wonder Professor Murray, with his current status, is willing to give up his face to stand up for this kid and personally fight for greater benefits for him. There are many geniuses in the world, like flowing water, and Marchionne himself is also called a genius by some people, so he understands even more. If many geniuses only have smart minds, they will be lost in the crowd as they grow up, and even go straight to Azkaban for further study because they are too smart. Only a genius like Wade, as long as he does not die halfway, his achievements are unquestionable, and his glory is obvious. How to win over such a genius? Marchionne changed his strategy, which he had adjusted 3 times. 11 years old. Is this child really only 11 years old? It makes him feel as if he has lived on the body of a flobberworm for more than 30 years. Could it be? Suddenly, Marchionne leaned forward and said in a low voice, Professor Murray, tell me the truth, this child is actually your illegitimate child, right? Wade, who was discussing the lead-powder ratio with the technical department, suddenly heard a scream. He turned around and saw that Marchionne had rolled down from the table to the ground, and Professor Murray smiled and indicated that everything was fine. But for some reason, his smile was a little hideous. Wade blinked blankly. Chapter 56, Lone Star and Sunday. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Aslan's magic workshop was indeed very efficient. When Wade went out, he already had the first edition of the Book of Friends in his hand. This is a preliminarily determined collection that is related to at least 2 people and at most 15 people. The cover is much more beautiful than Wade's handwriting. The font is bordered with gold and reflects the slightly swaying Lysianthus. The internal pages use different colors and flowers to show the difference. For example, sunflowers for 2 people, tulips for 3 people, daylilies for 4 people, violets for 5 people, etc., are all flowers that can symbolize friendship. In Wade's opinion, this Book of Friends is already very exquisite, but Marchionne is not too satisfied. This is the version for women. They should dust it with a little powder. Are there other versions? Vader asked. Of course. Marchionne said, there are versions for men, which will be printed with pictures of green pine trees, crowns, scepters, bows and arrows. There are also animal versions, which will be printed with unicorns, phoenixes, fire dragons, and Pegasus. One category, the children's version, includes velvet and fairies. The novelty version includes dementors and 3-headed dogs. The Quidditch version will feature famous Quidditch stars and broomsticks, and there are also Buildings Edition, Vila Edition, Order of Merlin Edition, Academy Edition. He mentioned dozens of types in one go, as if he could come up with a lot of money-making ideas without even thinking. Finally, he said, there are all kinds of patterns to choose from. Many people will buy a few more books for collection even if they don't need them. Go back. But we currently have the most flower templates, so I'll make this one first. If you don't like it, you can give it to your female classmates. When other versions are printed, I'll give you a few sets. Wade shook his head. What do I need so much for? You can keep it yourself. Marchionne said with a smile, it's also good to give it to classmates to get closer. I don't like to please other people. In other words, his life has not reached the point where he needs to please others to continue. This has been the case in his past and present lives. It's not a favor, but if someone does you a little favor, you can repay it with a friend's account. It doesn't need to be too much, just a set for 2 or 3 people. Marchionne gave instructions like an elder brother. This thing costs almost nothing to you, but it is a relatively precious gift to others. You will be very happy if you receive it. Also, Vader, he touched Wade's soft hair and said, we are not a lone star in the night sky. There are always times when we need help from others. How can you get it if you don't give it first? Although what Marchionne said makes sense, if it makes you feel embarrassed, then there is no need to imitate him. Professor Murray suddenly said, blindly imitating others will only make you lose your own judgment. All you need to do is just be good to yourself. A lone star is naturally lonely, but if it is the sun, there will naturally be stars around it. Well, maybe you are right, Professor. Marchionne shrugged, but I always think that there is nothing wrong with having a good relationship with most people. You have been thinking about how to make money all day since the 1st grade, but Wade is not a businessman, he is an alchemist, enjoying loneliness, pursuing the unknown, and being in the company of knowledge. This is the character of an alchemist. Don't use your unscrupulous business practices have come to contaminate my students, Professor Murray said unhappily. Hey, you are slandering, Professor. Marchionne protested, and immediately gave an example. If I really do whatever it takes to make money, then I should ask the technical department to adjust the use period of the friend's account to 1 year later. Users would have to buy new ones every year, so that the gold galleons would really continue to flow. But I didn't do that, which proves that even though I'm doing business, I still have noble moral character. But you must have thought about it, right? Otherwise you wouldn't blurt out such a vicious method. It's not illegal if you think about it. Their next stop was naturally Gringotts. It was already evening, and there were very few wizards shopping in Diagon Alley. Instead, some sneaky guys in black robes began to appear. Almost all of them walked into a dark and gloomy alley. Don't look over there. That's Nocturne Alley, the favorite haunt of dark wizards. Marchionne blocked Vader's view, and at the same time wrapped his arms in wide sleeves. Vader's whole body was almost covered by him, while Professor Murray walked on the other side of him. Several people arrived at Gringotts smoothly, and an elf standing near the door bowed to them. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening. Marchionne extended his hand and said, Mr. Wade Grey needs to rent a new vault. Wade Grey. The goblin looked up at Vader, who was almost half a head taller than him. He did not question his age, but nodded and said, Okay, I understand. Which one should I rent? Plant a treasury. Please introduce the types and prices to Mr. Grey first. Please come over here. Wade followed the goblin and Marchionne to go through the treasury procedures, while Professor Murray came to another goblin who was sitting on a high stool writing. Long time no see, Griphook. Hello, Professor Murray, is there anything I can do for you? The goblin named Griphook said respectfully. I want to get something from my vault. Professor Murray showed the key. Okay, wait a minute, I'll get the jingle. The goblins imprison a fire dragon in the underground vault to deal with those with bad intentions. The jingle piece allows the goblins and customers to travel safely through the vault. The first time Wade got on the legendary trolley, Michael once described it to him, as if it was going to knock your brains out. The stroller looks narrow, small, and very simple, but it is not crowded even if it seats 2 adults, a child, and 2 goblins. The pull ring flicked the armrest connected to the front of the car, and the cart clicked away. "Close your eyes and don't open your mouth." Marchionne seized the moment and shouted to Wade. Wade didn't ask stupid questions and immediately complied. The trolley slid down the steep slope, getting faster and faster, and gradually you could hear the icy wind whistling past you. The road in the middle must be particularly winding, because their bodies are involuntarily swaying left and right, as if they are trying to throw people away. Fortunately, he kept his eyes closed, and the dizziness was greatly reduced. Marchionne's arm was firmly stuck in front of his chest, as if adding a safety lever to him. After an unknown amount of time, the cart finally stopped. At this time, several people's faces were already pale, and they held on to the railing for a while before Wade and Marchionne could climb out of the car. As for Professor Murray, he still needs to go further down to get something from his vault. "Okay, let's set off," Griphook said, turning the lever on the trolley again. Another goblin named Color was standing on the roadside, with a 317 sign hanging on the vault door next to him. He held the bronze key with his slender fingers, inserted it into the keyhole and turned it a few times. The chains suddenly came alive and crawled around, and the vault door opened. Wade stood at the door and looked inside. The empty vault was like a huge cave, with not even a weed in it. "This will be your vault from now on, Mr. Wade Gray." Color handed him the key and said, "Please be sure to keep your key." Wade took the key, which had a slender silver chain on it, just enough for him to hang around his neck. "A bit empty, isn't it?" Marchionne said with a smile, and then signed a document and handed it to Color. "Transfer 50,000 galleons from my vault to vault number 317. Cooler took it expressionlessly and said, "Okay, please wait a moment." It seemed that within just a few breaths, a tinkling sound suddenly sounded in my ears. Vader was looking for the source of the sound when he suddenly saw tens of thousands of galleons falling from the sky, like a heavy rain in the vault. They hit the ground with a clanging sound, forming a golden hill, shining with dazzling golden light under the torch. Marchionne smiled and said, "One day, this place will be filled with gold galleons, right?" Chapter 57 Rewards and Tests. You are listening at novelfull.audio. "Mr. Cooler, can you just take galleons out of your vault?" That while waiting for Professor Murray in the hall, Wade asked Marchionne softly. "Don't worry." Marchionne knew what he was thinking and whispered in a low voice, "Goblins, they can put galleons into the vault, but they cannot take it out casually, unless authorized by the owner of the vault. The Ministry of Magic is here. We made a contract with the goblins a long time ago, a very ancient and powerful contract. It is precisely because goblins will never steal from others that people are accustomed to storing precious things in Gringotts. But I heard that Gringotts was broken into this summer." Vader thought of a certain news report that he had heard someone mention. "Yes, that's what happened." The goblin Griphook, who came over with Professor Murray, heard what Vader said and immediately emphasized with emphasis, "But he didn't steal anything. Gringotts is still the safest place in the wizarding world." Professor Murray, who went to get something, still had his hands empty, and Marchionne didn't ask any questions. After walking out of the gate of Gringotts, he said to the two of them, "Sorry, Professor, Vader, I have to arrange new products as soon as possible. It's only been a few days since school started, and there's still a lot of business to coordinate." Professor Murray nodded. "Go and do your work, Marchionne. See you next time, Mr. Marchionne." Wade also said goodbye. Marchionne bowed with his hat in one hand and walked away in a hurry. Wade saw that the direction he was heading seemed to be the offices of the Daily Prophet. Although he had sighed in his heart several times, at this moment he could not bear to. He couldn't help but say it again, "Mr. Marchionne is really a man who counts every second. As long as it has something to do with money, he is always more active than anyone else." Professor Murray said as he led Wade down the steps, "But he is a very good businessman. I am not saying that he is better than others. He is more honest, but he has a longer-term vision than others and can spend several years or even more than 10 years building a foundation in order to obtain greater benefits." He looked at Wade with admiration and said, "If you are already 30 or 40 years old, and you accidentally create the Book of Friends with a flash of inspiration, then I have to advise you to be careful, maybe Marchionne will try his best to use it from you have more profit in your hands but you are only 11 years old. That he paused and smiled inexplicably. Wade guessed, if you are younger, wouldn't it be easier to be deceived? No, Vader, Professor Murray said with emotion, you are young, this is your current weakness, but it is also your strength. Marchionne, like me, believes in your potential and looks forward to your success. The future will shine brightly. Therefore, he will help you as much as possible now, dedicate time, resources and energy, and even be willing to give up some additional benefits to support your growth, hoping that you can bring him greater rewards in the future. Wade frowned slightly. Professor Murray did not lower his head to look at him, but seemed to know what he was thinking. He smiled and said, unhappy. Do you think he is too realistic? Not unhappy. Wade did not admit it, but said, I understand that most relationships between people come from being needed and used, but Mr. Marchionne is very enthusiastic. It's hard to accept that his inner considerations are so. He hesitated, not knowing how to describe the contrast euphemistically. Professor Murray smiled and said, cold? Do you take practical interests too seriously? Wade nodded silently. Professor Murray said, Veed, the most terrifying thing in this world is not being used, because being used is also the recognition of your talents and value. People who have no use value at all are sad, just like a speck of dust. No one cares whether it disappears or exists, so don't be afraid or hate the idea of others trying to take advantage of you. You must learn to use your talents, overcome obstacles, and use this resource in this relationship of interests and needs. Promote your own growth, but you must keep a clear mind and protect your own interests. Don't become a tool for others, but be your own master. He lowered his head and saw the boy's gray eyes looking at him seriously. Although he didn't speak, Murray knew that the boy would definitely take his words to heart and think and learn attentively. A complex current surged in his heart. On the one hand, Terence Murray has the satisfaction and joy of sharing wisdom and experience, and watching students grow from ignorance to knowledge, from immaturity to maturity. On the other hand, he felt that he seemed to be transmitting the cruelty, ruthlessness and complexity of adult society to innocent children. He was worried that the children would take the wrong path due to negative influences, and he suddenly felt remorse and guilt in his heart. So Professor Murray changed the topic and said in a relaxed tone, but, these are too far away for you, so don't think about it for the time being. Just remember, don't promise anything easily. If you don't know what to do, whatever you want to do, just come to me. Professor Murray made a promise that he would never utter. Thank you, Professor. Wade raised his head and asked, you have given me a lot of help since we met, and I am really grateful. How can I repay you? Then, please continue to maintain your enthusiasm for learning and your unremitting desire to explore the unknown, Mr. Gray. Professor Murray said with a smile, for a professor, what else is better than seeing yourself? What about better rewards for your hard work? Professor Murray used the FLU network to send Wade back home again. However, because the acquaintances of the FLU network administration had already gone home from work, they could not temporarily connect the Gray family's fireplace to the network. They could only fly to the nearby area first and then walk slowly over. Professor? Huh? I heard that apparition can instantly transfer to another place. Wade asked, patting the soot on his hair, why do we use the FLU network? Because apparition is not a suitable way to travel with children. Professor Murray said gently, this is a profound and dangerous magic. If you are not careful, it will cause catastrophic consequences. Children are especially vulnerable. So when we don't need to escape, we should choose a safer means of transportation. It was late when they got home. The Grays were worried, one looking at the door and the other guarding in front of the fireplace. Fiona, who was standing in front of the window, saw the two people, one big and one small, walking slowly, and she screamed in surprise, holding up her skirt and rushed out of the door. Professor Murray stopped, looked at Wade and smiled, child, you have experienced a lot today, you must be very tired. Although as a teacher I should not say this, but, go home and have a good rest, don't read tonight, okay? Yes, Professor. Wade said respectfully and gratefully. Seeing that the two still had something to say, the Grays stopped at the door and waited for them to finish their words. Then finally, because your first work made me very satisfied, I want to give you a small reward. Professor Murray took out a very small box from his pocket and handed it to Wade. Wade immediately guessed that this was what he had specially taken from Gringotts. How valuable must something be for Professor Murray to put in the vault? He didn't know, but subconsciously refused. No, Professor, I don't refuse, Wade. Professor Murray stuffed the box into his hand without saying anything, and said, "This is not just a reward, but also a test. Use it well, Wade." Chapter 58 Waning Moon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. So, your parchment, Ferdinand said palely. Friend's account, dear, it's friend's account. Fiona corrected him dissatisfiedly. How could her son's outstanding and great invention be simply referred to as parchment? Okay, book of friends, Ferdinand corrected, staring at Wade with his eyes wide open. After selling the patent, they gave you 50,000 galleons, and there will be a steady stream of patent royalties in the future. There was something wrong with his demeanor, which made Wade, who was originally happy, a little uneasy. His expression subconsciously became serious, and he said seriously, "Yes, father. There are even people who want to buy it out with 200,000 galleons, but your professor didn't agree?" "Yes." Ferdinand looked like he was having difficulty breathing and said, "You followed your professor?" "Professor Murray." "Yes, it was Professor Murray, and a businessman, who went to Diagon Alley. It was Mr. Marco Marchionne." Wade pondered for a moment and said, "They all took good care of me. And then in front of you, and a goblin, he transferred all 50,000 gold galleons." "Yes, father." Ferdinand's expression was too strange, not like he was simply proud or happy for him. Wade was a little nervous. It was only then that he thought that he should have asked his parents for their opinions, but under Marchionne's urging, everything today seemed to be accelerated, and he subconsciously ignored it. Logically speaking, Professor Murray and Marchionne were not such careless people. But considering that his parents did not know magic, perhaps in their eyes, although Wade was only 11 years old, he was the only one in the Grey family who could communicate and make decisions on an equal footing. Realizing this made Wade feel a little uncomfortable. He suppressed these emotions and tried to speak in a relaxed tone. "Because school is about to start, Mr. Marchionne is very anxious and afraid of missing this opportunity to make money, so everything seems very hasty. Sorry, Dad, I forgot that I should come back to discuss it with you first." "Okay. Wade is only 11 years old, do you still ask him to do everything well?" Fiona pretended to be unhappy and pushed Ferdinand away, then hugged her son and kissed his forehead very hard. "Great, baby. Mom is so proud of you." How many 11-year-olds? The child can achieve financial freedom by himself. And it is your exclusive patent. It's so shocking. I can't believe I can give birth to such an excellent son. She kissed him, then pulled Wade up from the sofa and urged him, "What are you waiting for? Come and have dinner, I made a big meal. Ferdy, you go wash your hands too." "Okay." Wade, who was pushed to the dining table, turned his head and saw Ferdinand standing up with the back of the sofa. He even staggered and almost fell when he walked to the bathroom. Fiona didn't see it. She hummed a song and happily opened the lid. The aroma of the food immediately awakened the taste buds of several people. But Ferdinand couldn't eat the whole time. He almost poked the tomato into his nostrils. After the steak on the fork fell off, he chewed it for a few times before he found it. "Your father is so shocked." Fiona was worried that Wade would feel frustrated or disappointed, and whispered to him, when he was 11 years old, he couldn't even figure out addition and subtraction within 100, "This is too exaggerated." Wade couldn't help but smile, for the non-existent, clumsy father in his mother's mouth, and for the love shining in his mother's eyes. "Dad," after dinner, Wade asked tentatively, "Professor Murray helped me a lot today. Although he said he didn't need it, I still want to thank him, but I don't know how to do it." According to some hidden rules of the workplace he learned in his previous life, it is appropriate to take out 20,000 or 30,000 galleons to a noble man like Professor Murray at this time, otherwise it would be ignorant. But Wade hesitated for a long time, and still felt that if he said so, Professor Mori might turn his face on the spot. The past experience cannot be applied to the present, at least not to Professor Mori, otherwise it is hard to say whether it is thank you or insult. As an 11-year-old child, Wade knew that he didn't need to be too sophisticated or too smooth. But Wade didn't think it was possible for him to accept Professor Murray's kindness as if nothing had happened. Oh, Ferdinand was a little stunned, and after a long while he said, "Write a thank you letter, Wade." Write a letter. Wade didn't expect that his suggestion to Stephen during the day was to write a letter, and this suggestion was sent back by his father at night. Yes, write a letter, be sincere and attentive, Ferdinand thought for a while and said, on Professor Murray's birthday or holidays, remember to send a small gift, the most important thing is to repay with better grades. I understand. Wade nodded. Well, go write a letter, Wade. And, Ferdinand smiled with some difficulty, I am very proud of you, son. Watching his son return to his bedroom, Ferdinand sat down with his palms inserted into his hair, looking particularly depressed. What happened to you today? Fiona hugged him from behind, resting her head on his neck, her long hair sliding down her shoulders. She muttered in dissatisfaction, the little invention Wade made sold a lot of money, the professor at the school was so nice to him, and the businessmen he met were honest and enthusiastic. Everything was fine, why do you look like this? Wade didn't even smile when he returned to the room. Ferdinand, no matter what the reason, don't be a parent who will spoil the fun, okay? She muttered to herself, feeling her husband's tense muscles gradually relax. Yes, you are right. Ferdinand held his wife's hand and tried to smile, their professor is a good person. Everything is fine. I was too shocked, sorry. I'm fine, remember to apologize to Wade tomorrow morning. He happily shared his achievements with you, but you didn't even give him a good face. Got it. Late at night, when his wife was completely asleep, Ferdinand put on his clothes and went to the balcony. He wanted to light a cigarette, but his hands were shaking so badly that he failed several times. After finally lighting the cigarette, he took a deep breath. The smoke blurred his eyes and the lonely London at night. It was not until this moment that the overwhelming fear completely overwhelmed Ferdinand. His Wade, his smart, sensible, well-behaved and kind son, his brain was worth at least £1 million, and he had a huge fortune that could be cashed in at any time. He followed some strangers to a completely unfamiliar place. If Wade was in danger, if he was hurt, what could he do as a father? The wizard came and went without a trace, and Ferdinand didn't even know where to find him. He smoked one cigarette after another, and his body was trembling from fingers to toes. This night was so cold that it made people shiver. Upstairs, Wade watched the smoke drift away in wisps, and also saw the faint firelight flickering again and again. He leaned on the railing, raised his head slightly, and saw the waning moon like a silver hook hanging on the top of a tall building. Chapter 59, Buying. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The last week of the holiday went by so fast. Wade felt that he had only read a few books, but time had already slipped away. Professor Murray left him a small matchbox, which contained a small piece of curled, blue-black thin film, like a dried caterpillar or a wing membrane torn from a bat's wing. Because he could not use a magic wand, Wade only observed its appearance with a magnifying glass, and did not use more destructive monitoring methods. He could only study it carefully after he arrived at school. As he said, Marchionne really made the Book of Friends go on sale as scheduled. Wade also received an invitation letter for the release date of Aslan's Magic Workshop, and the owl sent him samples. There were 2 sets of each style, and it was noted that he could keep one set and give the other set to others. Compared with joining in the excitement of the first day of release, Wade preferred to read books at home. However, Fiona saw the advertisement of the Book of Friends in the Daily Prophet and wanted to go there with great interest, so the father and son accompanied her. The family drove to Charing Cross Road in Westminster, parked the car nearby, and then walked to the Leaky Cauldron. It had just snowed recently, and the ground was wet and slippery. Fiona held Ferdinand's arm tightly, and her feet were still slipping when she walked. I really want to fly to the Leaky Cauldron, drink some butter beer, no, fire whiskey, Fiona muttered as she walked tremblingly. It's almost there. Ferdinand comforted her. In fact, they had already seen the sign of the leaky cauldron. As squibs, the Grey couple did not accept them as students in the magic school, but the wizarding world did not completely close the door to them. Ferdinand and Fiona both have magic in their bodies. Although they cannot use it, it also makes them different from muggles. For example, they can see the leaky cauldron, which does not exist in the eyes of muggles, and potions can also have normal effects on them. If they were pure muggles, some potions that were common to wizards would turn into deadly poisons when they drank them, such as the bone spirit. Some injuries that were not worth mentioning to wizards would be irreparable and serious injuries to muggles. When Wade was in Hogwarts, the Greys would sometimes wander around Diagon Alley. Although they did not have wands, they could enter Diagon Alley as long as they followed other wizards when they opened the entrance, and others would generally not say anything. At this time, Wade felt that his parents were like returning home after entering Diagon Alley. Naturally, they first drank a beer at the leaky cauldron. I don't know when Fiona no longer disliked the hygiene here, and then followed the winding path to the entrance, all looking at Wade. Wade took out his wand and knocked on a brick on the wall. The familiar archway immediately appeared, and there was a huge poster in front of him, the Book of Friends, a landmark symbol. You haven't bought a Book of Friends for your child yet? Merlin, what should he do at school? Top quality, excellent but not expensive, irreplaceable enjoyment in the new era. With me by your side, the world is different. Communicate anytime, anywhere. The friend book changes your world and mine. Oh my God, Fiona couldn't help but exclaimed. Colorful posters can be seen in almost every corner of the site, and various slogans are rolling and appearing, urging people to buy immediately. Diagon Alley is crowded with people, parents of children everywhere, and even many foreign wizards. They don't need to go to Marchionne's shop anymore, because along the streets of Diagon Alley, there is a sales point every 10 meters. The clerk shouted loudly, "Limit 1 book per person. Limit 1 book. Hey, sir, you took too much. Don't worry. We will produce more products soon. Don't worry, if you are willing to wait for 2 days, you can sit in the store and choose slowly." Various styles, but no one listened to him. People kept pushing forward, holding galleons in their hands and shouting loudly. "Give me 3 books. I have 3 children. Don't squeeze in the back. Who stepped on my shoes? I want the red one, give me the red one." That a cry suddenly came from the crowd, and the crowded crowd dispersed with a bang. The 2 wizards rolled on the ground and fought. Screams and shouts were mixed together, and soon they were pulled apart by the people next to them. Fiona swallowed her saliva. Why don't we just look here? A wise choice. Ferdinand bought ice cream, and the 3 of them sat at a small table outside the store, watching the daunting rush to buy over there. The boss Fusco, wearing a vest, brought ice cream to the table and said with a smile, "Are you here to buy the Book of Friends for your children too?" Yes, Ferdinand said vaguely. "Then you better go buy it early." Fusco adjusted his bow tie and said, "I have inside information. The Book of Friends made by Aslan Magic Workshop Overtime is only this batch. After the purchase, their staff will have to take a few days off before they can continue to work. So if you miss this one, you will have to wait at least a week to buy it." Wade looked up at him. No wonder the shouting of the clerks to maintain order was useless. With these Diagon Alley bosses promoting inside information to create anxiety, of course everyone will worry that they can't buy it. "What is your inside information?" Ferdinand asked cautiously. "Oh, the daughter of a neighbor of my distant aunt works in Aslan's magic workshop and is responsible for the production of the Book of Friends, so my information is absolutely true and reliable," Fusco said proudly. "Oh," Ferdinand nodded doubtfully. "Wade, could this inside information be released by Marchionne's employees?" In order to stimulate consumption, rumors were deliberately spread. On the one hand, the official propaganda was we have a lot of inventory, and on the other hand, people revealed the inside information inventory is tight. Of course, people would choose to believe the latter. Wait a week, it's nothing, right? Wasn't it good to have only owls before? Fiona asked curiously. How is this the same? Boss Fusco looked at Wade and said, "Think about your son, madam, when he gets to school, his classmates are talking about and exchanging friend books, but he has nothing. Won't he be isolated? At least he will feel inferior, right? Think about that scene. As a parent, wouldn't you feel uncomfortable? Fiona followed his words and imagined it. The students in the school were playing in groups, chatting in the friend book, laughing and joking with each other, and her Wade could only stand alone in the corner, watching pitifully. Fiona's heart suddenly became sad, and she nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes. Of course. It's too pitiful, it can't be like this." "Right, everyone thinks so. At least let the child bring a friend book to school, so that he won't be out of tune with other children. So is there anyone who can resist not buying it?" "Can't resist, then I will definitely buy it," Fiona said very flatteringly. Fusco sighed and left, still sighing about the love of parents for their children. Fiona was looking at the people rushing to buy things, and suddenly she stood up. Ferdinand grabbed her arm again. Wade looked at her in surprise. "Ferdinand. Wade already has a friend's book, remember?" Ferdinand said helplessly, "He has a lot of friends' books, and he can exchange with everyone he meets. He is not a poor guy. He is even the inventor of the friend's book. What kind of things does he want?" Fiona blinked and suddenly realized, oh yes. "Wade, so, you are really encouraged, not secretly promoting for me, right?" Chapter 60 Farewell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The next morning, when Wade was woken up by his father, he found that it was an hour earlier than the alarm clock had been set. "It snowed last night, Wade." Ferdinand was still cold, and he urged, "Get up quickly, we have to leave early today." Wade sat up from the quilt, pulled his messy hair, and opened the curtains. He saw that the snow on the windowsill was about 2 inches thick, and the yard was also white. There was a circle of footprints around the car, which was left by Ferdinand when he was clearing the snow in the morning. Wade dressed quickly and went downstairs for breakfast. He heard his parents arguing in the kitchen. "Listen, dear, it's too cold today. There's no need for all of us to go to the station. It's enough for me to send Wade off alone. But I also want to send Wade off. I won't see him for half a year after he goes back to school." The two talked for a long time, and finally Ferdinand insisted that Fiona stay at home. He usually obeyed Fiona, but if he made a decision, no one could beat him. After the two came out of the kitchen, Wade pretended not to hear their argument. After breakfast, he asked, "Mom, can you help me take care of Miss Ava first? Let her fly to Hogwarts when the weather is good." "Okay." Fiona agreed happily and immediately made plans. "I can make her owl food myself. General Bard's rations are almost finished. And Milline, I think she may need to lose weight. The running will I bought before was also bitten. Million is Fiona's pet hamster. She is a shy little guy and doesn't need her to worry about it." Seeing that she no longer entangled in the issue of seeing her off and instead focused on a few pets, Ferdinand was relieved. They quickly finished breakfast, and Ferdinand picked up Wade's big suitcase and stuffed it into the trunk. "Goodbye, Mom." Before getting in the car, Wade turned around and said goodbye, and Fiona stood in front of the door and waved vigorously. The car slowly left. As Ferdinand expected, the road was slippery on snowy days, and the car drove very slowly. Even so, someone had a collision. 2 cars stopped on the side of the road, and some broken parts were scattered on the snow. The car was very quiet. Wade looked out the window, and suddenly his eyes blurred. A gray car seemed to appear next to them as if squeezed out of the air. Ah! What happened? Ferdinand looked at the rearview mirror and caught his son's surprised look. "Nothing. I seem to see a car rear-end collision." "Well, it happens all the time." Ferdinand didn't get distracted and focused on the front, so as not to encounter an accident and not have time to brake. Wade watched the gray car next to him run parallel to them for a few minutes, and then suddenly disappeared from sight. When he found it again, it just chased the car in front and drove through the intersection. The next second, the green light turned red. No one on the street noticed anything, including Ferdinand, who didn't notice the car that seemed to be jumping forward. If an ordinary person could see it, it would probably be regarded as a ghost story, right? Wade couldn't help thinking. The slowly moving car finally arrived at King's Cross Station, and it was still more than 10 minutes before the car started. Ferdinand took the suitcase off the car, put it on the trolley, and pushed it all the way to platform 9 3/4. When he got here, Ferdinand walked slower and slower, and finally had to stop. Vidkin held his hand. "Let's go in together, Dad," he said. Ferdinand smiled bitterly. "No, Vidkin, I'm not a wizard, I can't." "Yes." Vidkin interrupted him and said, "Platform 9 March 4th has no magical restrictions, even muggles can enter. It's just that the Ministry of Magic has cast a spell here, and muggles usually ignore it." "So, Ferdinand took a deep breath, staring at the brick wall in front of him with eyes as if looking at some monster. "I can also enter this platform." "Yes, come with me." Vidkin held his hand and led him forward. Ferdinand looked nervous, and when he was about to hit the brick wall, he couldn't help but close his eyes. Nothing happened, but the ears suddenly became noisy. The crimson train stopped at the platform, all the carriage doors were open, and children in Hogwarts uniforms leaned on the train windows to say goodbye to their parents. The platform was also crowded with people. Some children were running around in a hurry, and some were hugging their parents reluctantly. There were cats walking freely on the ground, and the owls in the cage turned their heads and looked around. The older students gathered together and started discussing their homework for the holidays. Some students struggled to get out of their mother's arms, saying, "Don't kiss me like that, Mom, I'm not a child anymore." "Have you put away all your friend books?" An old woman who looked very stern said to the child next to her, "Don't lose them, remember to contact them every day." The silly-looking child next to her said honestly, "I know, Grandma. Can I have another friend book, Dad?" A girl begged while clinging to her father's arm, "I have a lot of friends at school, my sister hasn't started school yet, you can buy her one in a few days." "Don't even think about it," a girl who was obviously younger next to her jumped and shouted, "Don't even think about it, that's mine." Looking around, at least one out of every 3 passengers was talking about the friend's book, and some couldn't wait to take out paper and start writing, indulging in online chatting. Some took out the friend's book every few minutes to see if there was any new message. In order to reply in time, they even clipped a portable pen in their chest pockets or ears. Ferdinand watched this scene almost obsessively. 9 3/4 station was different from Diagon Alley. It was once the starting point of his dream magic, but it eventually shut him out. When he was a child, he had imagined countless times that he would embark on a journey here, but in the end, he stepped into it for the first time at the age of 32. After a while, Ferdinand retracted his gaze and said in a suppressed, slightly trembling voice, "Let's go, Wade, let's find a carriage for you." They walked along the platform for a while and found an empty carriage. Wade put away his suitcase, got off the train and said goodbye to his father. Ferdinand put his hand on Ved's shoulder, wanting to say something, but he couldn't. Tell him to study hard. Ved has studied harder than anyone else. Tell him to build good relationships with others. Ferdinand has said this many times. Tell him, his parents will always be his backers, and he can ask his family for help no matter what problems he encounters. But Ferdinand knew clearly that he and his wife were completely powerless in the face of wizards. Even if Ved really asked them for help, what could they do for him except empathize with his pain? After a while, Ferdinand tightened his palm slightly. "We are always proud of you, Wade. No matter what challenges you encounter, don't be afraid, don't hesitate, and ask the teacher for help in time when you encounter trouble, understand?" Wade nodded, looked into his father's eyes, and asked softly, "Dad, you didn't want me to go to Hogwarts at the beginning, right? Why didn't you stop it?" "I can't, Wade." Ferdinand smiled bitterly. "I want to, but I can't, because I have heard that if underage wizards cannot learn to control their magic, they will generate a dark force called Obscurus, destroy themselves, destroy everything." So he could only watch his son step into the slaughterhouse that was like a death harvester in his eyes with worry. "Can't stop it, can't stop it."